Hi guys, welcome. My name is Dziengel and I am excited to be part of the STEM Homeschool Conference, here today to tell you about one of my very favorite subjects, working with kids of multiple ages on STEAM and STEM projects. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce you guys to me. I am a blogger. I blog at babbledabbledo.com. I've been blogging there for about 6 years. Before that, I was an architect and industrial designer. I'm also an author. I wrote a book last year called STEAM Play and Learn. And I currently run an after-school STEAM program at my children's elementary school, as well as I have held a local camp here in the Los Angeles area for the last few years. It's a STEAM-based camp. So I have a lot of experience working with kids of different ages on STEAM projects, and I'm excited to share with you guys why I think working with kids of different ages on STEAM is important and beneficial, as well as give you guys some tips, some practical tips on how to do it at home with your kids. Let's get started. I wanted to let you guys know where I'm coming from when we talk about STEAM projects. So as I mentioned, I'm an architect and industrial designer by training, and the reason that I sort of came to STEAM, it's not through an education perspective, like an educator's perspective, but really as a practitioner's perspective. And when I had kids and we started doing projects at home and everyone started talking about STEAM and STEM, I was immediately drawn to this because it's sort of been it is what I have been doing my whole life. My dad is an architect as well, so I heard a lot about architecture and design growing up. And really STEAM is the design process. It's what I did in architecture school, in art school, and design school. And so it was a natural fit for me when I started looking more into this educational model. It was natural for me to gravitate towards it. I just love it. So when I talk about STEAM projects, there's a couple things that I sort of use in my mind as criteria for what I consider a STEAM project. Now, I realize that there's a lot of discussion, and maybe some of the other presenters are going to talk about this, in the STEAM education world about what is a STEAM and STEM project. So that's why I want to talk to you a little bit about my criteria. Basically, to me, a project, if it's going to qualify as a STEAM project, it has to be cross-disciplinary. That's usually the first thing that I think about when I'm choosing a project and whether I can consider it STEAM. Does it have at least two of the STEAM topics involved? Science, technology, engineering, art, or math. If it just has one, I don't necessarily consider it a STEAM project, although engineering is a little bit on its own. But if it just is science, then it's a science project. If it's just art, it's art. But if you start combining them, science, art, now you've got a STEAM project. So it has to be cross-disciplinary. It also has to be project-based. It has to be hands-on learning. So we're going to skip worksheets and we're going to talk about projects where kids are making stuff and experimenting with stuff and working hands-on with the materials to learn. And the last important thing, which is why I think multi-age projects work so well as STEAM, is teamwork. So part of the design process, part of this sort of STEAM model of getting kids to learn how to be engineers and designers and problem solvers is about working with other people. So teamwork is critical to all STEAM projects. And that's why actually when you're working with multiple kids on a project, and especially when they're of multiple ages, it actually is really beneficial to everyone involved. It really reinforces that teamwork aspect. All right, so I also wanted to review really quickly what are the benefits of doing STEAM projects in general. First of all, STEAM teaches kids about connections. So that's the whole cross-disciplinary model. They stop seeing subjects in isolation and they start linking them together and seeing those connections. STEAM projects also focus on answering questions and problem solving. That's like one of the basic tenets of STEAM. So it's so, it's important for kids to stop just learning things by rote, but instead to start asking questions and learning how to solve and find out the answers to those questions on their own. There's also usually no right or wrong. One of the best things about like design school and architecture school is there's never a one answer that's correct. There's really multiple interpretations and multiple ways to solve a problem, and that's important when you're doing STEAM projects with kids. It's also very interactive and not passive. Again, no worksheets, but rather hands-on projects. And lastly, it's the peer-to-peer learning that is critical. That's an important tenet of STEAM, and that's where the whole multi-age dynamic really fits in well. Okay, so before we talk about how to combine multiple ages, I wanted to review what STEAM looks like at different ages. So I'm going to go over what preschool STEAM looks like, what STEAM in an early elementary school age looks like, and what STEAM looks like for late elementary and on into middle school years. So at a preschool level, STEAM is really about activities that are, again, cross-disciplinary, but are all very process-based. So process art is something that I link to STEAM often because it's kind of the same type of model. It's about giving kids a set of tools or materials and then asking them to solve a challenge. So giving them something to do where they have to interpret that, look at the materials they have on hand, and then derive their own solution. So process, not product. It's also, at a preschool level, it's really about asking questions, and it's about kids learning to ask those questions on their own. So preschoolers are super inquisitive. They love to know why. So encourage that. That's perfect. That's the perfect thing to do when you're working with preschool-aged kids on STEAM projects. And then hands-on experiences. So learning through play. I believe that the reason I've had, people come up to me and be very excited about our STEAM projects is because it's so playful. They're fun projects. Kids don't realize how much they're learning when they're building and when they're engaged in something and they're really excited about it. So really at the preschool level, it's about learning through play, making all the experiences very fun. Okay, so then when kids get into elementary school, and I'm talking about kinder to second grade, there's a few more things that you could be doing with them. So again, they're going to be cross-disciplinary projects always. But at this age, you can start introducing kids to problem-solving skills. So at preschool level, they're really asking the questions and they're tinkering. But now you can start directing kids a little bit more into actually solving something. So, give them a problem or challenge and ask them to come up with a solution and explain how that, different methods for doing that. That's the problem-solving process. It's also, now the kids are starting to develop, they have some of those more developed fine motor skills. So you can focus a little bit more on the making of things and teaching them some of the techniques of making. And then lastly, I really think at this level, you can start having kids develop presentation skills. So it's important when you're a designer and a maker and an engineer to be able to vocalize your concept, to vocalize your solution, to tell people what you're doing. And so I've had kids as young as 5 and on up start to present their projects in our classes and camps, and they love it. So you're never too, I think at preschool level it's a little harder, but once they hit kinder and on up, you can really start asking them to get up in front of a group and talk about what they're doing. And a little tip, this is actually one of our the kids' favorite parts of our STEAM classes. We always start the day with a tinkering challenge, and then if we have time, we do a showcase where the kids can get up and talk about their solution in front of the entire class, and they love doing this. So whereas adults don't want to do public speaking, kids are like clamoring to get up and show off what they made. All right, and then let's talk lastly about what STEAM looks like for older elementary school-aged kids. I'm talking about 3rd grade through 5th grade and then on into the early years of middle school. At that age, kids are really going to be able to use those problem-solving skills, and you can challenge them to be a little bit more thorough in those problem solving skills. So at the younger age, I often, I ask them to maybe make a few modifications, or have they thought about this, things like that. But at an older age, you can start really challenging them. And this introduces the concept of constructive criticism, which is a really important part of STEAM and the design process. So you need to be able to problem solve and come up with the solution, and then present it and get feedback. And from that feedback, you should be able to make changes if necessary. And I always tell my students that mistakes are absolutely encouraged. We love mistakes. So I think it's really important to be able to take feedback, not take it personally, and then use that feedback in a constructive way to alter or change or improve a design that you've been working on. So older kids are really capable of doing this. And this is when I'm working with multi-age groups, I probably challenge the older kids to be a little more thoughtful in what they're doing. And lastly, kids of this age they have really good fine motor skills. So this is when you can probably start doing electronics projects without too much trouble, because believe me, electronics projects are hard to do with young kids, because they're very fine and they just don't have the skills at a younger age. So you can start working on some of those more complicated projects that maybe require skills that younger kids just don't have developed yet. Okay, so now that we've reviewed where each age group should sort of be, where the focus of the STEAM project should be, let's talk about the benefits of working with kids of multiple ages on a STEAM project, and namely the benefits for younger kids and then the benefits for older kids. So as a group, the big benefit is that working with kids of different ages allows them to work as a team and to learn from each other. So that concept of teamwork, especially if you have a few kids at home with different ages, this is a great chance for them to work together on something or to help each other through the process. So teamwork, teamwork, teamwork. It also allows the kids to showcase their different strengths. So I believe that younger kids, one of their strengths is their sort of freedom of ideas. They are yet to be tied to some of the constraints that older kids and adults put on themselves and their ideas. They're not worried about, how's this going to be, or what somebody's going to think of this. They just make, and they're very free that way. And that's a great model for older kids to learn from, because sometimes as you get older, you start being more critical of yourself and your ideas. And so it's nice for older kids to really see how younger kids solve problems and that freedom. And it's very inspiring for older kids. For older kids, it's very fun for them to be mentors to younger kids. So older kids sort of develop this confidence, and especially when they're working with a younger sibling or a friend who's younger than them, they get to be sort of the adult or the mentor, and it really, really builds their confidence up. In my classes, one of the things that I often do is, instead of when a child comes to me with a question about, I can't do this, or I need help with this, I usually direct an older child in the class to help that younger child. And usually the older kid is super happy to drop whatever they're doing and help their younger counterpart. So they get a lot of, like I said, confidence building from that, and just they like being in that role, and it's a good thing for them to develop. Okay, so now that we've talked about all the benefits of doing STEAM projects with kids of multiple ages, I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of how to do it, because I think we all know it's great and we should be doing it, but how? How do we implement it? How do we choose projects? So right now I want to spend the next few minutes talking about some practical tips and considerations that I use when I'm choosing projects to work on with multiple age kids. Okay, so the first thing that I do when I'm choosing projects is I put them through sort of a set of filters. And I think about the different filters and the different ages and whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. So let's just start with a really simple one, materials. Materials is an easy one to consider. Right off the bat, does this project involve materials that are toxic, are dangerous in any way, have maybe some sensory issues, are hot? We use glue guns sometimes, and that could be a limitation if you're working with younger kids who may not know how to safely use a glue gun. So I think about safety a lot and the materials, if they're safe for the whole group. So we don't usually use toxic materials, but for instance, slime and some of those more, those materials like borax and such. You have to really think about whether you want your younger children to be using that, if they can do it safely, or not. Now, a lot of younger children are very capable of using these materials safely, but I've seen even older kids be the type of kids that want to put stuff in their mouth or just not clean their hands very well and be touching themselves. So really think about the materials involved. And if you have any issues or worries about safety, I'd probably nix it. Or as an adult, you may have to really supervise the younger kids with that material. Magnets are a big one. So I try to stay away from using really tiny magnets in general, but sometimes there are a few electronics projects which are really fun that use them, especially the neodymium. So for those, I heavily supervise the kids, or I buy magnets that are huge so that they can't put it in their mouth, because that's extremely dangerous. Batteries are another one. So those are just really considerations that you're going to have to make knowing your own children. And like I said, some young children are able to handle those materials safely and some are not. So think about materials. Then your second consideration should be abilities. This especially pertains to motor skills. So cutting skills. I do some paper projects and sometimes they're folded and it's hard for kids to cut through really multiple folds of paper with school scissors. Even folding can be an issue. With younger kids, they don't really know how to fold things properly, and sometimes you need really crisp lines. Now, I'm not saying you should nix necessarily a project because it might involve some of those skills, but just realize that some of those you may have to teach to the kids and or supervise some of the younger kids if they don't yet have those skills. But it's also a chance for them to learn them. And so, if you have a younger kid who's still working on their scissors skills, working with an older sibling who's very adept at it, it's kind of inspiring for the younger kid. On their own, they might not want to develop that skill, but when they see their older sibling using it successfully, suddenly they may be inspired to do so. So consider the abilities of your children. All right, next is project length. Obviously, younger kids have shorter attention spans, although some older kids have short attention spans too. But really think about the project length. So is the base project going to be suitable for a younger child and an older child? Sometimes you can kind of come up with a project that has a core, like maybe it takes 10, 15 minutes to do the main part, and then your younger child can sort of do something else, and an older child may be able to take it further. So think about that base part of the project and whether that can be accomplished with your children, with them able to focus for that length of time. That's not to say that you shouldn't try longer projects, but you may have to break those longer projects down into chunks. So you may have to do part of a project one day, take a break, come back the next day, or in morning, afternoon, but break it up a little bit. Think a lot about that project length, because once children sort of drift off, it's hard to kind of maintain that excitement about a project. So sometimes when I see that maybe they need a break, we'll stop the project, go on to something else, and then come back to it when they're fresh. Maybe they just needed a snack or whatever, but think about the length of the project and whether your children can successfully accomplish it. All right, now also another consideration is the amount of supervision. So as a parent, you're going to be helping them facilitate the project, but sometimes you just want to step back and even as an instructor, I just want to step back. I mean, part of STEAM is really the kids learning how to work on their own and develop the problem-solving skills. So we as adults need to be hands-off to give them that space to do that. So when you're doing a STEAM project, think about the amount of supervision. Sometimes maybe you want, like if you're doing electronics, maybe you want the core part to be heavily supervised. But then is there a moment where the kids can be a little free with it? Can they start developing another part of it on their own? Is it something that an older child can assist with? Like I mentioned before, I often have older children be mentors or guides, or just help kids put things together, help their younger siblings or younger friends at our classes put things together, because the younger child just doesn't have the skill set yet. So think about the amount of supervision and whether that supervision can be done by you as the adult or can be perfectly accomplished by your older children. And those are the winners. When the older children can really step into that role, that's a winning project. And then project type is the last consideration I have. Is the project open-ended? Does it involve problem solving? Sometimes I choose projects that aren't as open-ended as I would like, because they're really developing a certain skill or a knowledge about something, like for engineering or electronics or something in that vein. But I always try to take that project, that core, and then, add on to it. So there's some open-ended aspect of it. Whether it's they have to take the core, like we do bots a lot. That's very specific on how you put that together. But after we do the bots, usually the kids take them over to what we have in our camps and classes as a tinkering area, and they decorate the bots, and they give them personalities, and they put things all over them to make it turn their bot and turn the basic electronics component into something more fun and fanciful. So think about the project types. Like I said, it might not always be fully open-ended, but can there be a component where there's really some individuality can be brought to the project? So another practical thing is, what does a STEAM project look like when multi-age kids are working on it? Generally, you have your table set up, your work area set up, and you give your kids the challenge. You talk them through the steps that they might need help with. For instance, like I was saying with the bots, maybe there's some specific steps that they need to take before they can get to the process part. But kids should really be able to work independently and collaborate with each other at the same time. So we really love to use, we configure our classrooms and camps with big tables so that the kids can sit at the big table, work independently, and yet ask each other questions or call over a teacher, one of us, to help them. So that's what it should look like. That's kind of the layout. And so it should be a place where the younger kids can ask for help either from an older sibling or from the adult, the parent or the teacher. One more thing I want to talk about before we go is I wanted to talk about what to do with early finishers. Because inevitably when you're working on a STEAM project with kids of multiple ages, you're going to have kids finish at different times. So sometimes I find it's the younger kids that are done with the project and want to move on. Sometimes it's the older kids that kind of master something and they're ready to do something else. So it's important for you, if you're working with kids of multiple ages, to really think about other things that they can do and ways to learn about the topic that you're discussing when other people are still working on it, if they're done. So we love our tinkering area. That's one of the most important parts of our STEAM classes in our STEAM camp. It's basically an area where we have a ton of materials laid out, work tables, some low temp glue guns, tape, scissors, and the kids love that area. They love it. So usually when we're doing it, we start out our day there, tinkering, move on to a project, and then a lot of times the kids go back to the tinkering area. So I would suggest when you're working at home is set up a small area with either tinkering supplies or art supplies. And then when a child is finished with their project and they need something to do, instead of bothering the other kids or trying to run off and do something else, you can direct them to the tinkering area or the art area. You can also have a lot of books available. So this is a great way. At different ages, you can collect, you know, some picture books on the topic, some more advanced books on the topic, and make those available to your children. Older kids might actually really enjoy looking at a picture book on a certain topic. And sometimes the younger kids really like to look through some of the more scientific books and the pictures and the images. So, you know, if you're working on a project that has a couple topics, try and find a few books that are related and have them available for anyone that finishes early. Another thing you can do is have smart toys. Okay, what is a smart toy? It's really a tinkering toy, a toy that challenges them, an open-ended toy. We usually have a collection of them at our camps, but if you're going to invest in one, I would suggest that you buy Magnetiles. This is, I'm not an affiliate, but this is hands down the best toy you can have, and I have seen preschool age kids use them, and I've seen older kids up to like 11 and middle schoolers use them, and they love them. So it's a great toy to have on hand if somebody's done with the project. They're also coincidentally kind of fun to incorporate into the projects. I know I keep coming back to the bots project that we do, but I've seen our kids take their bots and then go to the Magnetiles and start building a house for the bot, a school for the bot. They even built a wrestling rink for their bots. So again, they were working together as a team. You know, the kids that still needed help were working over here. The ones that were done were working over here on building the enclosure for the bots. And it was such a great example of teamwork. So have some smart toys available. Another way you can approach it is to think about extensions in advance for older kids. So sometimes you can start with that core project and then you ask the older kids to really take it further. So they can journal about it, they can sketch it, they can continue on a design, they can do iterations of the project, they can take it apart and reconfigure it if there's something they want to change. So older kids, you know, when a younger child's finished, maybe they can go to the books, the tinkering station, and the older child can still continue with the project with extension ideas. Okay, my last bit of wisdom that I want to impart with you with regards to working with kids of multiple ages on these creative projects is you really can never go wrong with simplicity. You can never go wrong. Don't ever think a project is too simple or too easy for older kids. So I have had this experience a couple of times where I bring in a project for a certain group and then I see all ages love it. So, one of my best examples of this is Oobleck. I brought that into a kinder play date situation where there were a whole bunch of older siblings, and I actually found that the older kids enjoyed it maybe even more than the younger kids. So the younger kids enjoyed that whole sensory experience, and then when they were done, they wanted to move on and do some other things. The older kids just loved it. They loved that play. They loved really thinking about the science of it and what's going on and experimenting. So I really encourage you guys to never think that a project is too easy for your older kids. Because oftentimes older kids get so ingrained in doing more developed schoolwork that they just don't have a chance to play anymore. And so I think it's important for them to have those experiences, to be able to go back to some of the fun sensory stuff they did as a kid. They love it, and everyone will be inspired. So if you're very worried about what type of project to bring to a multi-age group, err on the side of simplicity. Simple sensory experiences always go over well, no matter what the age of your participants. All right, before I go, I want to leave you with a couple things. So I'm going to be putting together a list of multi-age projects that I have either done with kids or I'm planning on doing with kids in our classes. I'm going to put a link to that and give that to you guys. I also wanted to show you my book, of course. I wrote this book. It's a really great resource. I wrote it last year. It's geared mainly to preschool age children, and projects for preschool aged kids. But it's divided into a couple different, well, 3 different categories: easy, medium, hard. I think the easy projects are perfect for preschoolers. The medium needs some help, so it's a great way to get, younger and older siblings working together. And then I also have a few harder projects, which really are adult-led with a group of kids. So even though like I said, I developed it for preschoolers, it's great for multi-age groups. It really harkens back to that idea of simple is great for everyone. Simple is the best thing for all ages. So this is available. I'll just show you a couple things. We did geo boards, marble runs, Wizard's Brew. This is probably one of the, I called it Potions Lab, one of the projects that always does well at our camps and after school classes. Everybody loves this, all ages. They love it. So this is available on Amazon if you want to check it out. I'll also put a link to that. And I also invite you guys to my blog. I'm developing a lot of lesson plans this year. As I'm teaching now, I'm starting to see what teachers and homeschoolers need. They need a lot more backup to the projects, a lot more of the science and information behind a project. So I'm developing those as well. Those projects are going to be on my blog, and then I also have a TPT site as well. So thank you guys for letting me join you today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them by email. My email is anna@babbledabbledo.com. That's Anna, A-N-A, @babbledabbledo.com. So feel free to reach out to me if you have a really specific question about working with kids of multiple ages on STEAM projects. All right, you guys, go forth and conquer. You've got this. Take care.